Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
We can meet our destiny to build a land here that will be for all mankind a shining city on a hill.
You're listening to the Liberty Brothers Radio Show, only on Revolution Radio. Now, here are your hosts, Jim White and Jason Van Tatenhove.
The crusade for freedom is your chance and mine to fight communism.
Please hang up and try again.
This is Dan.
Hey, Dan, this is Jim White and Pastor Dowell here on the Liberty Brothers Radio Show. Thanks for joining us. We're live.
Well, thank you, Jim. Pleasure to be on your show.
Oh, pleasure's all ours, Dan. You've been a guest on the show quite a few times, and you and I have done a couple videos together, and your Agenda 21 work is really second to none. Maybe Michael Kaufman or Michael Shaw or some of those heavyweights, but other than that, you're right up there. Let me give you a quick introduction, Dan. I don't have anything prepared because consider you a friend of mine, so I don't really think of you that way. But joining us on the line is former County Commissioner Dan Happel. Dan, as I said, is an Agenda 21 expert. He's been on the program quite a few times, and when it comes to Agenda 21 and many other issues, Dan is my go-to guy. Dan, again, thanks for joining us here on the radio.
Alrighty. Well, I'm looking forward to the interview.
Well, Dan, let's start off here. I know there's a bill right now that's making a lot of national sort of headlines. It's a Montana bill, and I believe it's an Agenda 21 bill. And I want to say, is it 483? Is it HB 483? Is that what it is?
It's 583. 583.
583. And that really, if that was to be passed, that would really make a dent in the whole Agenda 21 movement here in Montana, I know at least. Why don't you give us a little bit of lowdown on that bill and what it entails?
Sure. We introduced that bill. Representative Randy Pinocchi introduced that bill yesterday to the Judiciary Committee of the House Representatives, and that bill, we had the hearing at about 10 o'clock yesterday morning, and it went very well, but obviously there's a lot of information. This is something that even though a lot of people know a little bit about, they've heard about it, it's such a complex issue and such a complex program that it's very difficult for most people to get their arms around it, without an awful lot of time to kind of read up on it and understand it. And quite honestly, I think it's probably a little bit too complex for most of the legislators up there to absorb in one session. And I'm hopeful that it'll get out of the House, that it'll be voted yes on the three sessions that are necessary to move it into transmittal to the Senate. But to be real honest with you, I think it's just too much information for most of those folks to absorb that quickly. And but it's great because we got it introduced. We got it before the public, and I think it is at a point right now where finally we're starting to get a national forum on this information. And what we've done is we've brought it before the public. We've been trying to do that for a number of years, and I think we're finally making the kind of headway that we're going to have a lot more people that are going to be listening and trying to do everything they can to learn more about the subject, because they're realizing that it is a direct infringement on our rights as Americans.
Well, if you could for a second, Dan, for those people out there that may not be familiar, there may be a handful. I don't know these days if there's many out there, but for the benefit of those that may be unfamiliar with Agenda 21, it's been out there, of course, a lot. We've reported on it numerous times, as you have as well. Give us just the Cliff Notes version of Agenda 21. We know it's a UN Agenda 21. Give us a little bit, like I said, the synopsis of really what it is and what it stands for, and then we'll have the good pastor jump in here afterwards.
Okay, good. Well, Jim, Agenda 21 is actually the name of the white paper that was produced after the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. At that Earth Summit, there were a lot of very radical ideas on how the environment had to become the top issue of most national governments, and that without their sustainability treaty in place and many of these programs in place, that somehow the world was going to go through an ecological collapse as a result of all the damage that man was doing to the earth through their economic development and, just the human condition, let's say. This idea came from, it's been promoted for a number of years by Maurice Strong. Maurice Strong is he was the chairman of the UNCED, which was the group that held the Rio Earth Summit. And Mr. Strong is a Canadian billionaire. He is an acknowledged Marxist. He was at one time very closely connected, and I think maybe still, with the Rockefeller Foundation. And he's now living in communist China and working as an advisor to the Chinese Communist government on monetary policy and on trade issues. And interestingly enough, the reason he's over in China right now is because he's a fugitive of Canadian law, and because of some of the financial dealings that, let's say, they were colorful, and that there is some legal issues that he needs to face back in Canada that I think he'd rather stay in China. So, under the Earth Summit, some of the things that are targeted for elimination by the year 2030 under their program would be private property, use of fossil fuels for travel or energy production, single-family homes. Other things would be meat consumption. It'd be mostly a vegetarian world, and use of natural resources such as mining and timber would be greatly reduced. Irrigation and commercial fertilizers and any kind of fertilizers for small farming would be eliminated, and the only thing that would really be allowed to happen would be large commercial agricultural corporations like Monsanto or ADM or some ridiculous. And then the one thing that's really very scary about this whole program is that they feel that the maximum Earth's population as a sustainable population needs to be held to 1 billion or fewer people, which means about a 90% reduction in human population. So anyway, that's a synopsis of it.
Pastor, you're pretty familiar with the Agenda 21, I'm sure. And my thought is we don't really battle against flesh and blood, but it's more of an evil spirit. What's your thoughts on that, Pastor? And Dan, you can comment on that as well.
Welcome to the show, Dan. It's Pastor Dowell here. The one thing that really truly disturbs me about this Agenda 21 thing is the fact that land is the foundation of freedom in America. It's the hope of everybody to own at least a little plot of land in order for them to be able to have life, liberty, and a pursuit of happiness, and to at least have some type of basking of freedom here in this world. It seems like to me in this agenda right here, and I know a lot of people are not familiar with it, but they're continually keep tightening the public control and the use of land by making certain declarations, such as declaring certain portions of land wetlands or rivers and sources as scenic rivers. And anything within the boundaries of that, as far as the eye can see, is controlled and regulated by the United States government. Could you speak to that and actually tell the people what's really truly going on? I think it's a personal land grab, but maybe you can go into a little bit more detail to give us a little bit more understanding.
Well, it is, Pastor, and thank you for being on this program. The land grab that you're referring to, actually, under Agenda 21, one of the things that would be one of their target areas is to turn much of the United States back into pre-Columbian wilderness. We've got to understand that radical environmentalism has been driving most of the thinking that's gone into Agenda 21 for the last 40 years. And many of these people believe that man is a plague on earth rather than man's ingenuity and our God-given abilities are something that should be cherished and utilized. Under Agenda 21, the target is for something like about 50% of the United States to become wilderness areas with virtually no human use or very, very, very limited human use. And then they're showing on their maps that indicate the areas that they want to save between the corridors and all the limited use stuff. That's probably about another, somewhere around 25 or 30%. What they show is concentrating the human population in very densely populated cities. We would literally become islands of human activity within these pristine wilderness areas. And the human population, we would be limited to stack and pack type of housing. It would be very, very densely populated. And then all public transportation with virtually no personal automobiles or anything like that. And the one thing I would mention is that property is also things like intellectual property. And with our individual property rights in the United States, things like the use of our intellectual resources, our human bodies are property. And all of those things are coming under the UN Agenda 21, coming under the control of the state.
Hey, we're getting some feedback. Pastor, can you please mute out your microphone when Dan's talking, please? Thank you, sir. Go ahead, Dan. Sorry about that.
No problem. I actually what I was saying is that private property is our intellectual property. It's our right, our God-given freedom of speech. And under political correctness and under these all these new regulations and laws and these crazy things that are coming out, we're losing all those rights to our property. I mean, our mind is our property, and yet if we have a feeling about a particular situation or a particular circumstance, a culture, another person, everything under the sun is coming under the hate laws and political correctness to the point where we can't even think without having somebody tell us that we don't have that right.
Well, I've talked about this on the show before, Dan, and certainly both you gentlemen can comment on this. It seems to me that the Most High makes promises to us that we can rely on Him for, let's say, and the government wants to step in and take that place of God and be really, I guess, probably control things and sort of be like God. What do you guys think about that? Do you think the government tries to usurp God's power and sort of step into His place? Pastor, go ahead. You can answer first.
Sure. Ever since the Tower of Babel, when Yahweh confused the languages in order to force the people to spread out and to fulfill the law, be fruitful and multiply, man has not stopped in his quest, nor has he stopped in his agenda of trying to rule the world and the populations of the world. And of course, Dan said something that actually strikes a thought into my mind, even more so as I hear him speak, is that the agenda also, along with this Agenda 21, it's all about control. Because if you can move everybody into these population centers, then it's a whole lot more easier to control these people when they're in condensed populated areas as opposed to being spread out all across this land. And so now I see even more the reason why that they want to start declaring wetlands and started giving credence to the spotted owl, or putting things on the alleged endangered species list, and the beat continues to go on. But man is not stopping in his quest, siding with Satan, playing Almighty Yahweh himself. So this is the ultimate agenda. Is that right, Dan? Is for them to move everybody into these population centers to where they can easily control everyone.
It is, and things that are happening in that regard are geared to taking away virtually all of our freedoms. I know a lot of people are concerned about the collapse of our monetary system. This isn't something that's happening by accident. This is being orchestrated, and it's being orchestrated to move us into a cashless society. And this cashless society would be a digital economic system. Frankly, we've gone so far away from the gold and silver that our founders intended. With these fiat currencies, and with a banking entity, a central banking entity like the Federal Reserve, which is a privately owned corporation, and the other central banks around the world, which are also privately owned, including the International Monetary Fund, those corporations can control the entire commerce and the entire economic activity of the world. And if they get to the point where they can eliminate cash and they can get us into this cashless society, which is exactly what they want to do under a one world currency or one world system, they can control every aspect of our lives, and there'll be nothing we can do about it. They put a chip in our hand or in our forehead, and Pastor, I'm sure you know the mark of the beast. This kind of a situation will allow them to control everything about human activity, and if they get someone that is a rogue or somebody that doesn't agree to go along with their program, they'll turn off that chip, and those people will have absolutely no ability to even survive in society because they won't be able to eat.
Well, if you remember, both you fellows have probably seen that great movie by Aaron Russo called Freedom to Fascism, and from Freedom to Fascism. And he talks about the conversation, Aaron Russo talks about the conversation he's had with the Rockefeller, I guess one of the sons was a friend of his. And that's basically what you just stated is what he said. The goal is to have everybody chipped, and the elite, their chip is going to be special. And it's just going to say basically kiss my rear end on it, and everybody else is going to be subject to, I guess, whatever they choose, as long as we're chipped. But you hear about, we talked yesterday, Dan, we talked about the rise of the robots. We talked about the whole singularity movement to merge man and robots. This is really not a human. It almost seems like the people that are trying to run these things aren't really human. They're not from the same species we are. What's with the evil in these people, Dan?
Well, the thing that I find about it is that we've got to understand one thing. Communism is a godless system. Communism does not believe in the ultimate supremacy of a god. It believes in the ultimate supremacy of whoever's in charge. And this system is exactly what the UN is predicated on. In my Agenda 21 programs that I do, I use the 1936 Soviet Constitution on human rights. And that passage in there is virtually identical to what the UN Declaration of Human Rights is. And these things, one thing we've got to understand about the UN, of the 192 countries that are members of the United Nations, virtually, all but a very, very few are either tin-pot dictatorships, socialist, or communist countries. We are one of the very few constitutional republican systems of government in the entire United Nations. Now, think about that when they say that we need to give up our sovereignty to the United Nations. You know what system of government we'll be living under then? It certainly won't be the one that our founders envisioned.
Well, I agree with you. Pastor, any comment?
I definitely have a comment on that because, the Bible is proving itself to be true as we go on. People can continue to keep adopting whatever philosophy and religion they choose in this world, whether it be atheism, communism, any of the isms whatsoever at all. I'm going to read a short passage here in the book of Revelations right here to show exactly what Dan is revealing and what we're speaking about here today, James, shows that the direction that we're going in is a communist fascist state. But it really truly is communism, because Dan just made the statement and he said whoever is in charge. Now, those of us that are familiar with the book, we know that there's only going to be one that's going to be in charge, and that's the man of sin when he comes up on the scene, the beast. Revelations 13:14 says, and deceiveth them that dwell upon the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on earth that they should make an image to the beast, which they had wounded with by a sword, and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he calls it all. Now here's the key right here, what Dan has been speaking to, both small and great. It makes no difference. He's not going to discriminate, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. And the purpose of this mark is that once they cattle or condense everybody into these population centers, and they have ultimate control of the human population and the human species, if I can use that term. The purpose of it is that no man might buy or sell, say that he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of the name. But the scriptures goes on to give us wisdom and says, let him that have understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of man. It is the number 666. So as we continue to keep talking about this, hopefully somebody can hear exactly what Dan is saying, because he's bringing a lot of clarity. Because when you mention the Agenda 21, most people have no idea that these little bitty things that they are instituting and trying to continue to keep taking away from us, including civil liberties, that is ultimately going to have an effect on them whatsoever in their lives going forward.
Well, you're right, Pat. You're right, Pastor. I think that we're having some kind of a echo here.
There we go. I think we're good.
Okay. You're right, Pastor. I think the one thing that I would say to that is that these little things have, all of a sudden, they've started to become very big things. And what we were seeing when they first started implementing Agenda 21 policies in the early 90s through administrative fiat and through different cabinet level agencies, have now snowballed, and they've turned into major policy decisions. And I use the statement, and I believe this is correct. I mean, I haven't taken a physical count of these things, but I would say that right now about somewhere between 80 and 90% of all the new administrative, cabinet level administrative decisions that are coming down and being implemented are directly or indirectly related to UN Agenda 21.
I'll tell you what we're going to do here, fellas. If it's okay with you, let's try to open up the phone lines. If anybody has any questions here, we got about 15 minutes left before the end of the first hour here. If you have any questions for Pastor or for Dan on Agenda 21 or other issues, you can call Studio B line at 310-421-4053. That is 310-421-4053. Or you can get through on Skype if you go to Freedom Screen 2. That's Freedom Screen and the number 2. Dan, we've stated before when we've talked about Agenda 21, really, I see Agenda 21 as almost being, let's say, I used an example before, let's say you grow vines outside your house. Well, first you have to sort of put up all that lattice work, and then you start the vines on the bottom, and it grows up, and then that lattice work, it becomes sort of the foundation for the whole vine. If you kind of get my analogy, I see Agenda 21 as being that lattice work. They sort of put that in place, and then they just grow all their little Agenda 21 programs all up and down that lattice work. And before you know it, you're overwhelmed, much like you would in the real world be with some of these vines. What do you think about that analogy? Is that fairly accurate?
I think it is, but the one thing that I would say about Agenda 21 is that there are programs that are kind of evolving off of the basic premise, basic concept of Agenda 21. But this has been a very well articulated, very clear picture of what they wanted to do. And the Agenda 21 document, which is the white paper that was produced, the original one was 767 pages, something like that. In any case, it really outlined everything that was on that program, and it's being implemented very much piece by piece, and through a kind of a gradualism where they pile on just about as much as we can take, and when people start screaming too loud, they kind of back off and then wait a year or two and then add some more. And we're like I use the analogy of the frog being boiled. If they threw us in a pot of hot water, a frog would jump out immediately and escape that boil. But if you put him in that same pot of water and increase the temperature of that water 1 degree at a time until he finally boils, and he didn't even know it was just a comfortable thing for him until it was too late. And that's kind of where we're at, because if you look at the amount of debt and the amount of government control we have on all of our local communities, that analogy really comes to pass, because we've been so comfortable with our way of life and our TVs and our football games and all that. And meanwhile, all this stuff has been going on around us, and now we're $18 trillion in immediate debt, 120-some trillion in unfunded liabilities, and then we've got this cloud of $1.6 quadrillion in derivatives out there that are being guaranteed by American taxpayers. And all of a sudden, you realize how enormous the amount of control is over our lives.
As I begin to sit here and think about even more so what you say, everybody seems to have some type of policy today to where the interest is all about the children. And of course, this Agenda 21 is hiding under sustainable development. Of course, that's the educated way of putting it. And of course, we all know, all three of us know that this is destroying freedom and it creates tyranny. And of course, what they've done is hit it right at the basis, which is the start of the education system of the public school. I personally believe that the education system is not there to educate the children, but to indoctrinate them to the acceptance of the constraints imposed on by the preservation of common good that is indispensable to the freedom, for us to be able to exercise the freedoms and the liberties, because we continually keep watching everything eroding, be it social, political, economics, when they started a long, long time ago, taking the 10 Commandments out of the school system, it's like, okay, we're going to get rid of God. And if we get rid of God, and then we have that doing which is everybody is right in their own eyes. And so now we've got people turned over to earth worship. Everything is either anti-Christian, anti-Israelite. There are no national standards as far as morality. And we are literally spiritual bankrupt. What say of you, Dan?
Well, you're absolutely right, Pastor. And this is the thing that we have to understand the very basics of our system of government under our Constitution is a process called natural law. Natural law is a law that recognizes that our rights come from God. They don't come from government, they come from God. And those are referred to, and this is the correct pronunciation, unalienable rights. Everybody calls them unalienable or inalienable, and those are incorrect pronunciations. It's unalienable, and that comes from the natural law and common law from English law. And one of the things under natural law is a recognition that the rights of man cannot come from government, and that government exists to protect those rights and not to control those rights. And that's something that's just been completely turned on its head.
You know, Dan, we see, you know, people like Michael Bloomberg, who I think is just an enemy of the Republic, if you want to know the truth. And unfortunately, he has billions of dollars. This is sort of outside the Agenda 21 realm, but I know that you can certainly speak to this. You see him coming across the country and going to other states, not even his own, and trying to implement these and backing and supporting these anti-gunners. We talked a little bit earlier, Dan, about the banking industry and how they have really they're trying to shut out some gun manufacturers. I know you're a Second Amendment guy, a strong Second Amendment guy. Going forward with the whole gun agenda, they're not done trying to really disarm us, are they? I mean, can you see this battle is going to have to be fought on a day-to-day basis, is it not?
It is going to have to be, Jim, and the thing that we need to understand and understand completely is that they won't be satisfied until we are completely disarmed, because one of the goals of Agenda 21 is global government. They call it global governance, but it's same thing. And under global governments, they need to disarm all populations so that the UN so-called peacekeeping force will have total control of the populations. They'll be the only armed force, and it will eliminate national boundaries and therefore national military complexes. And so the United States would be basically just one more state in a much larger world that would be controlled by an oligarchy that had their own professional army, and we would be completely disarmed. And that is the intent, and it has been. And Jim, I can refer to something too that is part of Agenda 21 that a lot of people don't think about. We've lost our ability for bottom-up government, and the reason that our founders were so visionary, so brilliant, is that the way they saw government was that God was sovereign, that man was his direct descendant, and therefore he was the next in line in control. He was sovereign, and he would pass what was necessary for his protection on to local government, and local government would pass it on to state government, and they would pass it on to the federal government. It was from the bottom up, not the top down. And our system of government right now is totally the opposite. And what's happening in Montana is very indicative of a lot of the rural states that don't have a big population, and we certainly don't have a very dynamic economy anymore. All the money from New York or California or the more populous states are flowing into our state, and they are directing our environmental, our gun policies, everything else. And whether we realize it or not, we're the inflow of outside money is destroying our independence.
What's it say you, Pastor?
I agree 1,000%. I mean, actually, I'm hearing a few other things that I wasn't even familiar with myself, somewhat, but I really do truly appreciate Dan being here and giving us all this education. I'm a solution type guy as well, Dan. And what more can we do? What more can we do as a people to be able to wake these people up? I understand that we need grassroots movements everywhere. I mean, it's about waking up one person at a time. I know that Jason and James is doing exactly what they can do on their end, and of course, I'm doing whatever I can do on my end. And having you on here and us having dialogue like this is it's a beautiful thing because it's an outlet that's going to go further. But what can we do to provide the people information to help those who are wide asleep? I didn't say wide awake, wide asleep, to actually wake up.
Well, I think it's happened the way it has for a reason, but the fact is that average Americans are way too comfortable in their lives, and I think we finally, because of the enormous infringements on our civil liberties, on our property rights, all the other things, we're finally getting enough pain in this country that people are starting to wake up and they're starting to pay a little more attention. Now, we've got probably one of the most dumbed-down populations in the world because we have had it so good for so long. And one of the problems with that is that people want to maintain the status quo. I think that they're starting to realize that the future is pretty bleak because of the fact that we tried to maintain the status quo and it's eating us alive. Our country right now, our economy and our government is like a cancer. The way it is, it spends more than it can produce, and we're literally eating ourselves alive with the economic policies, the political policies, and Pastor, are also our spiritual policies. We have done such a lousy job of protecting the Christian community and the founder's vision of what freedom of state and freedom of religion is. And we're eating ourselves alive with this kind of foolishness. And I think people are finally starting to wake up, but what we need to do is we need every person in this country and every person that's listening to this program needs to have their goal of becoming as educated as they can about the issues, and then all they have to do is convince one other person to listen to what they have to say and to look at the information themselves and educate themselves. And that will snowball. It's all exponential. That will snowball if we have enough time to make it happen.
Well, Dan, we're coming right to the end here. Before we cut out and the music starts, go ahead and give out any websites that you have, anywhere you want to send people to find out more information. I know you're friends with some of the heavy hitters in Agenda 21. They have a lot of great videos and information. Go ahead, you have the floor.
Well, my good friend Michael Shaw has been enormously helpful on this Agenda 21 bill, and his website is freedomadvocates.org, and he would be an excellent source for a lot of information. He's one of the leaders in the field. We really need to, I would recommend that people go to YouTube and just Google search UN Agenda 21. There is so much information out there. It's incredible. There's literally 20 or 30 million locations on that site. So, Agenda 21.
Well, here comes the music, Dan. We just want to thank you for joining us today here on the Liberty Brothers Radio Show. Keep up your great work, and we'll be in touch. We'll be back after the first hour here with Rich Sheben on the second hour with Pastor Charles Dowell here on the Liberty Brothers Radio Show.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.